Now to the latest in our Decision 2024 coverage. Nebraska's senior senator wants to stay in politics.
As Brian Massery reports, it's a familiar position for her.
Next year marks Deb Fischer's 12th year as a U.S. Senator, representing Nebraska. Today, surrounded by some fellow Republican political heavyweights at the state capitol, she asked voters for 6 more years.
In the Senate, seniority matters. I'm a senior member. I'm the second highest ranking Republican on Armed Services Committee. You know, there's never been a woman chairman of Armed Services Committee, and it just decisions like that on what I can offer for my country and what I can offer for the people of the state of Nebraska.
The state Democratic Party plans to share this fall who they plan to put up against her. But when it comes to statewide races, it's all uphill. 49% of registered voters are Republican, compared to 27% registered Democrats. Nebraska is clearly a red state when the rural areas are combined with the purple urban areas of Omaha and Lincoln.
But she was the first major public person to come out and help me out when I was an underdog.
Congressman Don Bacon represents District 2, where party registrations are more even, where Democrats have held the seat in recent memory. He says Senator Fischer has been a key partner when it comes to working on infrastructure, defense, and agriculture.
We are pioneers, and we are patriots. We don't want a hands up, we just want a fair shake.
Political observers are expecting a big turnout in November of 24. There are 2 Senate seats up in Nebraska, Fischer's and Pete Ricketts.
Plus, you've got a presidential year. That's going to drive turnout up. So I think the fact that you've got two federal statewide offices, the presidential race, I think that's going to mean for a little bit higher turnout than we would expect to see in a state that's typically a one-party dominant state.
On your side in Lincoln, Brian Massery, 6 News.
This afternoon, the state Democratic Party responded to Fischer's announcement saying, quote, Senator Fischer has spent her career in politics saying one thing and doing another. Fischer says she supports property rights and then turns around and supports projects using eminent domain for private gain, end quote.